What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast as part of the Man Cave Podcast that is brought to you by Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Dan here with you as always. Don't forget to follow both the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast and the Man Cave Podcast. And while you are there, if you could, give us a 5-star review and a positive rating. That way it helps other people find the podcast. I want to talk a little bit about the Packers free agency and the kind of, well, I guess maybe the second wave of free agency, or maybe what the Packers are thinking at this point in time. I'll admit it. I would like to see Green Bay still add a veteran wideout or another edge rusher, and I know the pickings are slim and such. And it wouldn't surprise me if Green Bay somehow brought in a veteran receiver. I don't know what Amari Cooper or some of those other guys would cost, but if they could get away with a 1-year, few $1 million and such this year, okay, that I can see. Or another. Honestly, I could maybe see that more than like a defensive lineman at this point, if I had to pick between the two. But I wouldn't expect anything long-term, anything, trade-wise, any big thing like that outside of trading Jair or, and I get it, there's not a whole lot of players left out there in free agency to sign for big deals in that. But I mentioned it a little bit the other day, and I think when you take a step back and you kind of look at everything, and it makes sense, as frustrating as it may be for fans who believe that the Packers should have done more in this offseason. It makes sense, though, that I don't think Green Bay is going to make any more moves, like whatever you want to define as a big move or a solid move in free agency, just because of what their cap situation looks like next year, because it's not good for next year. And I alluded to it the other day, because they've got next year, with just 29 players accounted for on their roster, they've got more costs on the books next year with just those 29 players and what they do for this year. So obviously that's not a very good cap situation to be in. So I could see a few different things here. One, remember, salary caps can roll over into the next year. So maybe Green Bay elects to keep some salary cap this year and roll it into the next. They could do that. They could sign some of their guys. And that's the thing, too. Like, even next year, they've got guys that are scheduled to be free agents that aren't accounted for this. We're talking the Romeo Dobbses, the Christian Watsons, the Devontae Wyatts, the Quay Walkers, the Zach Toms. I mean, that's a lot of snaps there. And say what you want about who they should keep or priorities. I think a lot of us would agree, Zach Tom's probably a priority on that. So I could see Green Bay maybe using some of that salary cap space that they currently have right now to try to get some deals done for guys who are scheduled to be free agents next year, like a Zach Tom, so they can take some of that salary cap from this year and put it towards that deal. We know Goody already mentions at the Combine that he'd prefer to sign Quay Walker to an extension rather doing the 5th-year option, and which was met with a lot of blowback from some Packers fans. But from an accounting purpose, it makes sense. Instead of giving him a 5th-year option that the whole year is completely guaranteed, you sign him to an extension. It could lower the cap number and such. So I could see Green Bay doing some of those moves yet, and that would, I guess, kind of count for some free agency stuff, is to lock up a guy like a Zach Tom and a Quay Walker. Again, whether you agree with it or not, whether you like it or not, if that's what they view as free agency moves. But that's where, when you look at it, and you look at their cap situation for 2026, it ain't great. It's not great, and I think that's going to factor into some of the decisions for Green Bay for the rest of this free agency, and they're going to have to, make some difficult decisions. And yes, moving on from Jair, if that still is the plan, which I think a lot of us still assume is going to be the plan, that will free up some of that space next year. But that's why I feel like, in just my opinion, if Kenny Clark has a similar season to what he did this past year, he could be a guy that gets dumped and create some cap space that way. He's a guy that can move on. And it's going to be interesting to see, another guy that's scheduled to be a free agent next year is Rasheed Walker. And I don't know what the plan is going to be for him. Do they try to lock him up, or do they say, okay, we've got Jordan Morgan we're going to try over there? Do they still focus high on the draft this year for offensive line help and continue to build depth that way? But you look at some of the guys that are scheduled to be free agents, and you look at the salary cap situation that Green Bay's in for 2026, it maybe gives us some clues to what the rest of the offseason, including the draft, it kind of maybe gives us some clues to potentially what could be the Packers' plans for this year, but also for next year, because we know that's how Green Bay operates. It's not always, not going to say it's like this all the time, but it's not always about the now. It's also about the future and putting the team in a position to be, in a good spot for years to come. Once in a while, they've deviated away from that. We know that. But I feel like that's kind of their vision right now, to still remain competitive and still try to put their team in the best position to compete for championships for the long haul and not just kind of a one-and-done type of situation. So when you see guys like, for example, a Romeo Doubs and a Christian Watson scheduled to be free agents after this year. And, Watson's a tough one because he's coming back from that ACL injury, and we may not see him until November. That's a clue to me, and given that they haven't made any moves this offseason with the receivers, that's a clue to me that maybe a wide receiver is going to be addressed again in the draft. Is it a first rounder? Is it a day two sort of thing? But that's kind of like, and you kind of get away with maybe hopefully getting a receiver on the cheap again and in a rookie deal. That makes sense to me. Again, I don't know if that's what Green Bay's thinking, and I hope that when it comes to the receivers, I hope that Green Bay gets back to the plan that Ted Thompson always did, or the, I don't know if plan is the right word to say, but they always had the receiver cupboard stocked. It was always full. They were never short on guys until after, Devontae left, and then you had the season where it was Lazard and Cobb and Watson and Doubs in their rookie years, and it was just like, okay, they didn't have that guy, but we've talked about it how many times when Ted Thompson was there. They always had the receiver cupboard stocked so that next guy was ready to go, whether it was Greg Jennings, whether it was Jordy Nelson, whether it was Cobby, whether it was James Jones, or whether it was Devontae Adams. They always had that guy ready to go, that next guy up, or a couple options on there. And then they kind of got away from it, let it go. And I know those picks of MVS and Equanimeous St. Brown and Jamon Moore didn't work out. But it got to a point where it was like, okay, now you're relying on some younger, unproven guys to be your top ones, and it didn't work out. So, that's maybe potentially one clue for me to be like, okay, maybe a wide receiver is going to be a main priority for the upcoming draft. Same for defensive line. We haven't seen them make any signings this year. They haven't done anything. Devontae Wyatt is scheduled to be a free agent if they don't pick up the fifth-year option. Kenny Clark, I think, is coming into a season that he's got to show something. Or it could be a simple restructure and they kick the can down the road when it comes to his contract. But Kenny Clark's got to show something this year. And, those are two positions, defensive line and wide receivers, that I think if you polled a lot of Packers fans, you'd have liked to have seen that the Packers address those in free agency, in the early waves of free agency. And they haven't done that. And the fact that they still haven't done that maybe gives us a little bit of an idea, a little bit of a clue that, okay, they obviously view that as maybe a position that they can address coming up in the draft. Again, it's just speculation. I'm trying to play a little detective here and put on my Sherlock hat and figure out what is this vision, what is the Packers' idea or plan right now. But factoring in the what's left in the free agency pool and kind of looking at towards what 2026 looks like in terms of a salary cap situation, if you're still holding out a little bit of hope for them to make moves, and that includes a Cooper Kupp, and hey, if they sign Cooper Kupp, I'm okay with it. But I'm not holding my breath anymore, considering some of the rumors that we've been hearing in terms of the numbers that he could potentially get. I mean, if he does get $12-13 million per year, good for him. But I think that takes Green Bay out of the running at that point. I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, you look at your cap hits for 2026. Jordan Love's up there. Okay, he's number one. Get it, got it, good. But that Kenny Clark one, you're talking about $31.4 million. Then you got Rashawn Gary on there. Then Jair comes in at fourth. So yes, that would alleviate, him moving on. Will take that away. But then you got Aaron Banks up there right away. And then Elton Jenkins, Xavier, Josh Jacobs, Nate Hobbs, Keyshawn Nixon. Lucas Van Ness moves up to number 11. But his cap hit's only about $5.5 million at that point. So, I mean, you're talking about 6 guys currently on the roster right now for Green Bay for 2026 that have about at least a $25 million cap hit. Green Bay's 29th out of 32 in available cap space as of right now for 2026. That's not great. It's not great. And not a lot of dead cap space on there either. So that, when you factor that in, I was thinking about this last night and kind of perusing around of who's still available in terms of free agency. Could there be, some guys that they can make? And then the whole Cooper Kupp stuff that was kind of being floated out there, in terms of money. And I'm like, you know what? I don't see it anymore. I don't see them doing anything, any more free agent signings, essentially, unless they're like very small 1 year, few $1 million deals to bring in some veterans to bolster some depth. Because I do think they're looking at that 2026 situation. I really do. And I get it that, the cap's probably going to go up, but it's not going to go up so much where they can completely change their mindset and how they're building this squad and building this team for the now and for the next few years. So I feel like, get ready, Packers fans. There's going to be picks in the draft that, they're going to be, I think, heavy on edge and defensive line and wide receivers. But it goes back to, I think, a grind my gears that a lot of Packers fans have. If that's the plan, if that's what they're going to go with, and focus on the draft and try to find an edge rusher or a defensive lineman or a wide receiver, get a guy that can contribute right away. Get a guy that could be a part of the rotation right away. Not somebody that you're banking on that, all right, you know what, couple years, might be a little bit of raw in the first year or two, but his ceiling's super high if he does hit that ceiling. And that's the key word, if. I think at this point, it's like, if you are going to get that lineman, you are going to get that edge rusher, or even a wide receiver, get a dude who can help you out now, who can be a part of that rotation, because it's clearly evident that they want a rotation with their linemen, with their edge rushers. They want those guys. Okay, so put somebody in there, not just to get in there and get some experience and get some snaps and get their feet wet, but get a guy who can affect the game right away and help you win some dang ball games. Get a wide receiver in there who's uber talented and you're comfortable throwing out week one. I don't think we have to worry about the whole quote-unquote trust stuff, and with a former quarterback that we had when it came to younger receivers, always got to earn that trust. I don't think we have to worry about that as much right now. Play within the system. And get that receiver, whether it's the kid coming out of Ohio State or somebody else that you feel like, all right, that's a dude that could be coming in day one. Justin Jefferson wasn't a top 5 pick, top 10 pick. Dude came in right away and was pretty darn solid. You could find those guys. Okay, there's probably not Jamar Chase was a top 5 pick, but you can get that receiver. Heck, even Randy Moss wasn't even a top 10 pick, and I know that was because there was some concerns about his off-the-field stuff and that. But you could find guys at that 23rd spot or in the 20s, wherever Green Bay's picking. You could find guys at that position who can come in and be a starter, who could come in and ball out for you right away. For crying out loud, you could find those guys in the second round. Cooper DeJean was a second-round pick. Cooper DeJean was a Super Bowl hero this year as a rookie. You could find those guys. And I just want to see Green Bay maybe change the mindset a little bit when it comes to their first-round picks and find a guy who can help you out now, and maybe bypassing the guys like, those raw intangibles, though, they're super, super good. If we just coach it right, if we harness that thing right, and we mold this guy, he's a little bit more of a ball of clay, but we mold him the right way, that dude could be a stud. Okay, it works once in a while, but right now I think we just want to see a guy that's going to help you out. Because we obviously know it's still a weakness when it comes to the pass rush. It's still a weakness when it comes to the defensive line. If you truly want to back up your words, whether it's from the GM or the coaching staff, if you truly want to back up your words and be like, yeah, we want to get home with 4. Yeah, we got to get better at getting after the quarterback. And you didn't make any moves in free agency when it comes to that because for whatever reasons, because, okay, the money was a lot this year for them, or, okay, the talent out there is just, it's drained out right now, and then you're looking at your 2026 cap, then you better find a guy in the draft that you feel pretty darn good that, okay, we're going to put him out there right away, and he's going to help us out right away. I don't want another project. And you're hoping that it just works out. And I get it, the draft's a crapshoot, and we can't predict it all the time. But I want a guy that, when he's selected, we're talking about that's a guy that can help you day one. Not, didn't have a whole lot of experience in college, but the intangibles are there. The raw intangibles are there. It works out once in a while. Clay Matthews had that. Clay Matthews was labeled that. But luckily, he got a shot after a few games into the regular season. Wasn't a starter right away. Got in there, made some plays right away. They hit on that one. Not the case for some other dudes, though.